The world we live in is a world filled with as much war as there is peace, as much death as there is life, as much hate as there is love. This is the way of the world. A world without war, death, or hate is unheard of. Many would agree that these are just realities of life, and that the idea of any other kind of world is nothing more than a fantasy. Hate causes war causes death, and death in turn brings about more hate. This cycle of hatred is one that the people of the world have been trapped in for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It is a cycle of death and destruction that kills all and leaves nothing left standing. In war, people not directly involved within the conflicts of their country, such as innocent civilians, are often killed indiscriminately on large scales by WMDs, also known as weapons of mass destruction. This is the topic of my presentation. My goal today is to educate you on the benefits, drawbacks, and ethics associated with the use of WMDs. The term weapons of mass destruction was first coined back in the late 1930s by Baron Cosmo Gordon Lang, who said, "Who can think, without horror, of what another widespread war would mean, waged as it would be with all the new weapons of mass destruction?" So what is a weapon of mass destruction? A WMD is a weapon with the capacity to inflict death and destruction on such a massive scale, and so indiscriminately that its very presence in the hands of a hostile power can be considered a grievous threat. There are three categories of WMDs: nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and chemical weapons. Each of these kinds of weapons has been used at some point within history for warfare, and their effects were absolutely terrifying. The most uncommon WMD used in the history of warfare is biological weaponry, which could be found in bacteria, viruses, fungi, or toxins, and were disease-producing agents that could be utilized as weapons against humans, animals, or plants. Although rare and uncommon, it was extremely harmful. One of the earliest and most notable instances in which biological warfare was employed was in the early 1700s when British soldiers infected the native Indians with smallpox by passing on blankets infected with the virus. A later instance in which this devastating method of warfare was employed was by the Japanese during biological warfare experimental trials, where they experimented on and killed more than 3,000 human subjects, including Allied prisoners of war during World War II, some of which were Canadian. They were testing with infectious agents such as the bubonic plague, anthrax, typhus, smallpox, yellow fever, tularemia, hepatitis, cholera, gas gangrene, and glanders, among many others. Imagine what would have happened if the research had been released on the world. The results would have been fatal. Imagine no further. The research was later used in bioterrorism by Al-Qaeda in the early 2000s, when they sent letters infected with anthrax, a deadly bacteria, to prominent members of the United States government, killing 5 people and infecting 22 others, causing billions of dollars in decontamination fees and costs. The problem with biological weaponry is that it cannot be contained or controlled. It is incredibly difficult to detect until it's too late, and they kill indiscriminately and on such massive scales. That is the reason why they are called weapons of mass destruction. Their lack of predictability and high fatality rate is what makes them so very dangerous. Of the more than 190 members of the United Nations, only a dozen or so are strongly suspected of having ongoing biological weapons programs. However, such programs can be easily hidden and disguised as vaccine plants or pharmaceutical production centers, which is a huge concern in trying to maintain and regulate biological weaponry. Biological weapons are not as expensive as nuclear weapons to manufacture, yet a lethal biological weapon might nonetheless be the strategic weapon that would win a war. There are not nearly enough restrictions in place to discourage and halt the possession of biological weaponry. There is always the threat of it falling into the wrong hands. Then, what would the world do? A more commonly used counterpart to biological weaponry is chemical weaponry. A chemical weapon is defined as any of several chemical compounds, usually toxic agents that are intending to kill, injure, or incapacitate enemy personnel. Chemical weaponry kills indiscriminately and is incredibly deadly to mankind. The use of chemical warfare during World War I is extremely popular. Mustard gas, nerve agents, and other deadly chemicals resulted in the deaths of over 90,000 people and the casualties of 1 million during the war. Those injured as a result of chemical warfare suffer the effects for the rest of their lives. World War I scarred an entire generation.
Created using Powtoon.